The reading is from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Let us be attentive.
At that time there came to Jesus a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he besought him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As he went, the people pressed round him, and a woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years and had spent all her living upon physicians and could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the multitude surround you and press upon you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone forth from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, a man from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe, and she shall be well." And when he came to the house, he permitted no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James, and the father and mother of the child. And all were weeping and bewailing her. But he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed. But he charged them to tell no one what had happened.
Peace be unto you. Proclaim the good news of the gospel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good morning, everyone. Kalimeras. I had the opportunity this week to go to an area of our country that I've never been before. The second half of this past week, I was down at the border, the Texas-Mexico border, and it was an experience unlike anything that I've ever had before. Now, being at the border confirmed a few things to me. Number one, the images that we see on TV are not just political stunts, it's a reality. But perhaps more impactful than any of the images and the experiences that I had down at the border these last few days was the trip there. You see, when I went there, I drove down 59, and like many of us who have driven through the great state of Texas before, went through small town, about 30 miles, and then another small town, about 30 miles, and then another small town. And almost every small town was the same. The vast majority seemed quite depressed. Most of the buildings looked like they were abandoned, even if they weren't. I'd find one or two gas stations, usually at the front and at the end of each town. There's always a Dairy Queen, and usually some kind of a pawn shop. But rising up, the only pinnacle of a skyline in any of these little Texas towns, without fail, and every single one of them was always a beautiful church. Always a beautiful church. And I would deviate from 59, and I would drive a couple blocks over to the left or to the right so that I could drive by these beautiful and historic churches. And I kept thinking to myself, what was going on here in that town at the time when the people gathered together to build this beautiful church? Now, I don't know. Perhaps there was an oil boom there. Maybe there was high cattle prices. But the one thing that was common is that I had to understand that in each and every one of these small towns at some point in time, the majority of the people in that town had a focus on the Lord. Imagine for a moment these little startup towns that were popping up in literally the middle of nowhere. And the people who were there as a part of that town made a common choice and a decision to say, the best building in town is going to be the Lord's house. We're going to rally together to make sure that our common points, The nicest thing that any of us have is going to be a church, and that's where we're going to gather, and that's where we're going to seek Christ. And it was inspiring to me. And so, when my time through Little Town X was up, after about 3 minutes of driving through, with a deviation from 59, I couldn't wait until 30 more miles went by and I got to the next town so I could see what the next church looked like. And what a lesson that taught, not only me, but what a lesson that should teach each and every one of us whenever we drive through these little towns. That our ancestors in this land led the way for us, not in terms of laying down infrastructure and buildings and roads, but they led the way for us in terms of faith by teaching us that what our core focus, our primary focus, and the foundation of everything that we are gunning towards in our life has to be illuminated by Christ. We have to be focused on Christ first, or else whatever it is that we find ourselves doing in our lives will never be as fruitful as it could have been. It'll never be as fruitful as the plan that God had preordained and established for us. We have to be like those early pioneers of little towns like Freer, Texas, to say, Christ is first. Christ is the most grand thing in my life, and I need to apply that in every corner and every relationship and every aspect of who I am as a person. It needs to start off first and foremost at home, because not only is home the first society, it's also the first church, and it's a reflection of who we are. And so Christ has to be first in your marriage. Christ has to be first in your effort to seek a spouse. Christ has to be first in how you raise your children. Christ must be first in your home. But it isn't relegated there. How about at work? Now, I know we live in a society today that's bastardized that beautiful line by Thomas Jefferson, separation of church and state, and so many different businesses and places of work now seem to tell us that we can't be Christians when we're there, we can't have a focus on Christ there, and you know what my response to that is? Sachlamadas. This is garbage. This is utter garbage. Who's going to come to you in your office or in your cubicle, or when you're running back and forth in the warehouse, and tell you that you're not allowed to be saying a prayer? Who's going to come to you in your place of work and tell you that you can't interact with the people who are around you with the agape love of Jesus Christ? No one. And if someone ever does, I encourage you to quit, start your own business, compete, and put them out of business. How about when we're at school? Some of our kids go to religious schools, some don't. But Christ can be present in every moment and every interaction when you're in the classroom or in the hallway or the cafeteria or on the sports team. It all depends on how you treat one another. And it goes out beyond that, even here. Is Christ our first focus in everything that we do at church? If he is, it will be blessed. If he's not, there's a lot of churches closing all across America. And when we have a focus on Christ, and then we choose to take it a step beyond and to actively participate in the experience of Jesus Christ, then miraculous things take place. We heard about it in the gospel reading just now. Because a father had focus on Christ, his young daughter was ultimately not only healed, but brought back from death. Because a woman who had health issues for 12 years was focused on Christ, she was healed of her physical infirmity. But remember, they weren't focused on Christ sitting at home. The father didn't say, boy, I've heard about this Jesus, and I really wish that he would help my daughter, and then sat at home reading the newspaper. He got up off his rear end, and he went and he sought Jesus Christ. He put the work in. He made the transition from focus to faith. Because you see, faith, the thing that Jesus said, made the little girl well. The thing that Jesus said healed the woman's issue of the flow of blood. Faith is an active proposition. It's not a philosophy. It's not a thought process. It's a way of life. And so you and I need to get busy on our focus and on our faith. And if we do so, everything gets better. Our marriages get better. They might be okay now. They'll be better. Our family unit, better. Our places of work, better. Our schools, better. Our church, better. If we unapologetically make Jesus Christ our focus and we work to be people of faith by applying Him in all these capacities of our lives. Now, it's a daunting proposition because being a Christian's hard. Knowing about it's easy. Calling yourself a Christian's easy. Being a Christian, hard. And so it's a daunting proposition. And we might, in the midst of that hesitation, say to ourselves, but I'm only one person. What kind of a real difference can I make? I'm the only one in my household that goes to church. I'm the only family in my neighborhood that's Orthodox. I'm the only one at work that says a prayer before lunch. I'm the only one at school and on the sports team that kneels down in prayer in the locker room before I hit the floor. We're only one church in all of Houston Metro. What kind of an impact can only we seem to have? Well, I understand. But allow me to share something back from my time at the border these last few days. The place where I stayed in Laredo was right on the Rio Grande. All I had to do was look over my shoulder to see the boats going up and down the river and the checkpoints coming across the border. Right across from where I was staying was the central town square. I arrived in the evening, and I thought to myself, I'm going to go outside and walk around. Could you tell I live in suburbia? I walked around a little bit. I made it halfway into the town square, and I said, I think it's going to be a better idea for me to go back to the hotel. And I did. The next morning, early in the morning, I walked outside with my cup of coffee and I said, I'm going to walk. I did the town square, I did the border area, and a few blocks in each way around. And I can tell you, wasn't a safe place. Wasn't a safe place. Between watching dozens at a time of individuals, pretty much all young men, teenagers through their 30s, holding backpacks and glad bags filled with belongings, being ushered onto unmarked buses and sent off out of town. That happened about 3 times a day. Between looking at the poor souls that have been influenced by evil, who are covered in tattoos across their entire face, their necks, and I imagine everywhere else on their body, walking in and out of the town square. It goes on and on and on. There was a spot of light, and it was that on the opposite side of the town square was the town cathedral, the Catholic Cathedral of St. Augustine. It was the only building that was maintained in all of Laredo. I can tell you that for sure. It was beautiful. There's a big Byzantine icon of the Virgin Mary right outside, smack on the side of it. And the church bells used to ring throughout the day. And so when I got over my own sense of fear that first night, and I realized that I could sit and walk outside underneath that beautiful spire of that church, that statement of a commitment and focus and faith in Jesus Christ, I was able to walk around, not foolishly, but absent of fear. You see, All it takes is one church in a town filled with crime, one individual and a family that's apathetic in their faith, one church in a town to unapologetically say we are focused and faithful to Jesus Christ, and great things can take place. So now, after you and I are healed in this divine liturgy this morning, each and every one of us is filled with a choice. Who are we going to be when we leave church today? Are we going to be the husband, the wife, the father, the mother, the employer, the employee, the coworker, the teammate, the schoolmate, the neighbor, who's focused on Jesus Christ in our life and lives out our faith? Or are we not? That's the only choice that truly matters. And if we make a good decision, if we decide to dedicate ourselves to focus and faith in Jesus Christ, get ready, because life will be beautiful. If not, then I pray that one day we'll take our heads out of the sand, because eventually the Lord will return and we'll be accountable to the choice that we make. To God be the glory, and to us the choice of faith in Jesus Christ. Amen. Good morning, everyone. Kalimera σας. As you know, anybody that's been to church more than once, I don't usually speak from these things. So that should give you an inclination to know that somebody else is going to address us this morning. We're very honored here at St. Basil's to welcome one of our brothers in Christ to worship with us here this morning and to address us. And I speak of Mr. George Cantonis, who is the president of Hellenic College, Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology, our seminary, the wellspring of the church in North America, our seminary, where our priests and lay leaders are cultivated and, dare I say, reared to be able to come into the churches across America and to continually lead the faithful to Christ. I've said it multiple times in the past, you've heard it. If our seminary was to cease to exist, the church in America would die within a generation. And so there are very few, if any, positions in the institution of the church as important as the presidency of our seminary. Mr. Cantonis is touring through our area, spreading awareness about our beloved school, and was kind enough to join us in worship here this morning. I asked that he might address our community briefly here this morning. He said, I can do it in just 1 minute. I said, we're faster at St. Basil's than most. Take 5. We'll be fine. And so with that being said, I asked Mr. Cantonis to please come to the Solea and to address not our, but his spiritual family here at St. Basil's in Houston. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything.
For everything.
Just make sure
Is this on? You all can hear me? Great. I don't remember the conversation the way he said it. I said, well, I can do 1 minute, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And he kind of thought for a minute. And knowing how much I talk, he knew that 5 was out. And 7 was dangerous because that put me between you and coffee, and that's not a comfortable place to be. I just want to give a couple overviews, but I want to close a little bit differently than I have when I've spoken to other parishes, because we've had a really, really very, very good week at Hellenic College Holy Cross. And I want to read some quotations that came from a team of 4 regulators from our accreditation agency. After they spent 3 days interviewing just about everybody, short of landscapers, students, faculty, administrators, staff, alumni, board members, it's amazing. And what makes it a really comfortable experience for the president is that he can't attend any of the meetings. So I can't glare at anybody, I can't cut anybody off. They end up having to say exactly what they think and feel. But it is moments like this one presently, when I'm speaking in a successful parish that is led by a dynamic priest, that some of the questions that I'm going to pose are going to register, I think, a little bit more profoundly than they might in other places. Where do our clergy develop their spiritual formation? That becomes priestly formation, where they learn the theological, liturgical, pastoral knowledge required to shepherd the flock that is their parish. Well, as Father mentioned, it's at Hellenic College Holy Cross in Brookline, Massachusetts. For without our scholi, we would have no priests, no churches, no viable faith in this country. St. Basil's, Father Luke, your new bishop, His Grace Bishop Constantine, a board member, a good friend, and someone who I'm confident you'll come to love and respect. You, the parishioners, the choir, all of you are our faith in action today. But what of our faith in the future? Hellenic College Holy Cross is the future of Orthodoxy. It is where our future priests will be trained, how our faith will continue to be studied, how Orthodoxy will learn how to not only survive, but to thrive in the chaotic and challenging world in which we live today. We have some of the finest theologians on faculty in all of Orthodoxy, educated in some of the most highly respected theological schools, not only in the United States, but in Europe. We have a beautiful campus known as the Holy Hill, and a chapel that is the heart and soul of the formative experience of our seminarians. We have a board composed of hierarchs, clergy, outstanding educators, and business people who help direct the operations and the strategic planning and future of our school. But our challenges are great. We must grow. We must put more courses online. We've begun doing that. Our clergy need continuing education to help them navigate the demanding challenges they face in their communities. Drugs, divorce, abuse, pornography, but most importantly, to sum it up, a world that denies truth, simply denies truth. The church is more than hierarchs and buildings. It is at its core our clergy leading the flock. Help us help them. Help us produce more of them. Now, normally I kind of launch into my close, but instead of doing that, I want to read 3 things that are the summary of the team to give you some of their reflection on who we are. And for the president to say these kinds of things, it's expected. It's my job. But this is what comes from free, 4 hard-boiled academics whose job it is to come in and evaluate us from soup to nuts. And I'm just going to read a couple of their statements. Hellenic College, Inc., which is the corporate name of the institution. Hellenic College, Inc. has a strong and clear sense of mission. The school's constituents understand and are devoted to its commitment and its unique capacity to form leaders for church, society, and world within a Hellenic, Orthodox, Christian worldview. Stakeholders within and beyond the school appreciate HCHC's new leadership that has increased confidence in the school's capacity to execute on its plans and offer high-quality educational programs and religious thought. There has been brought together a capable, credible set of newly hired senior leaders who have, with the president, developed a vast array of, and this language is really very, very important. They parse their words very carefully. A vast array of professional and realistic systems for running the institution in a way that meets the expectations of 21st century higher education. This is the Greek Orthodox College and Seminary they're talking about. It would seem no exaggeration to say that in a short period of time, the school has turned around. There's another quote that I want to read that has to do specifically with the student experience, because this really is all about the kids. Now, and remember, this doesn't focus on the School of Theology or necessarily on the college. This is an overview of the entire entity. Students express satisfaction, affection, appreciation for their HCHC experience. Rather than bemoan the relatively small student body, they, to a person, described personal attention and meaningful relationships that caused them to feel fortunate and grateful. They embraced the Christian identity of the institution, whether studying religion as a major or professional calling, or engaged in the study of other disciplines. The family-like feel on the campus is palpable, and all describe an environment of support and care for students, not just from the faculty, but from every member of the staff. I'm going to share one other observation with you. We had an evaluation of our classics department, and the evaluator was a professor at Boston College. And that evaluator was being shown through our institution and noted the learning management system that we had in place. And they were aware of the fact that a few years ago we didn't have a learning management system. It's a software system whereby students, faculty, deans, and faculty can work together in an organized manner. The system that we have that's known as Canvas is identical to the one at Harvard and MIT and at BC. And the professor from BC asked our professor of classics, well, how long did it take you to put this in? And she said, well, we evaluated it in April of the year. It was the COVID summer, if you recall. That fall, all schools were shut down. We evaluated it in May, installed it in June, trained in July, trained the kids in August, and it went to effect in September. And she was in a state of shock. Harvard, BC, and MIT took 4 years to put it in. We installed it in 4 months. She was given a tour of one of our high-tech classrooms. These are classrooms that are set up for hybrid teaching. In other words, there are students that are sitting in seats, and there are students that are on the internet, Zoom, whatever the system might happen to be that's been chosen. And instead of the students that are not present being 2-by-3-inch pictures, they are literally on the walls. They are as intimate to the classroom experience as the students who are there. The students actually, remote or in class, end up developing significant relationships with each other. The professor sees no difference between the student that's in class and the student that's on the wall. Some of the faculty like to say off the wall sometimes, so we're talking on the wall in this instance. And it makes hybrid teaching a seamless operation. The Boston College professor looked around and again asked, how long did you have this? When did you start doing this? The professor said, well, we started installing them about a year ago. We have 9 of these classrooms now. The BC professor's response was, we don't have this at BC. So what I am trying to convey is the fact that we have brought this institution a very, very long way in a 3-year period of time. We have laid the foundation to be able to realize the future that our school needs to fulfill, the future potential that it needs to fulfill, because it can't be just another seminary. It needs to become the center of Orthodox thought and study in the Western world. Because if it doesn't accomplish that goal, it will not serve the function that our faith requires in this country to not only to survive, but to thrive. And that's our goal. We need to be shifting from a concept of maintenance to a concept of mission. We need to be reaching out. But to reach out, we need to teach in. Our faithful need to understand our faith better than they do. That's why the online classes. That's why the online degrees that we're going to be putting in place. Continuing education for our clergy, who are being overwhelmed with the chaos of the society that we are dealing with today. And things aren't going to get easier. Things are going to get even more complicated. That's just the way of the world. So the service of the seminary in our school is not only internal, it's external. It's not only to bring in the knowledge and to educate on the inside, but to go ahead and to turn and reflect that knowledge to the outside. But we can't do it without the help of our faithful. Funding, resources, constant issue. Our accreditation, I'm very confident. We can't be assured. This report is only one piece of several reports that go into the accreditation agency. But I'm fairly confident we will receive our 10-year accreditation. 3 years ago, we were on accreditation probation. This is how far we have come within a 3-year period of time. Within a 3-year period of time, we went from hemorrhaging several $1 million a year to positively cash flowing. This will be our 4th year. The reduction of debt, 75%, $15 million worth of debt paid off. We only can continue doing that with the faithful. I was in Greece visiting a very, very prominent clergyman who made an observation to me. This was at the very beginning, and there was a lot that we had to do. And he made an observation to me that I thought was telling. And he said the following: George, you need to keep one thing in mind. The church will end up with the school they deserve. That's a personal reflection. What do we deserve? What does our faith deserve? What do our children deserve? What do our grandchildren deserve? The onus is on all of us. I'm very honored by and humbled by Father's comment about the importance of my position, but I can assure you that I am honored and I am humbled by being the person who happens to have slipped, and that's a very long story, over a very large bottle of wine, to tell you how this non-priest, non-theologian, non-academic expert in higher education got into this role. But what I do know at the end of the day is that the role that I play is to facilitate your interest. It's to facilitate your involvement and your engagement. It's to bring a team together to do this, because it's only a job that a team can do. So I ask for your support, whether it's in time, talent, or treasure, because we will only be as successful an institution as all of us allow it to be. So, Father, I thank you very much for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts. Thank you all.
I want to thank Mr. Cantonis for once again addressing us here. Moving from maintenance into mission is perhaps the most stoic and telling statement that came out of that 5-minute talk. And I pledge that we at St. Basil's will continue to support the mission of the church, the mission of Jesus Christ, and how it's executed at the Holy Hill, our beloved seminary. You hear me say that quite often, and it's because it's not only my opinion or my feelings, but more importantly, it's the reality that we all exist in. That is our seminary. And it doesn't take a bottle of wine to figure out how Mr. Cantonis came to the president's office. All that it takes is a little bit of honesty. Someone of his caliber and professional expertise was needed. He was asked, and probably against every fiber of common sense in his body, he ultimately acquiesced and said, I will. And so the church is very thankful to you, and we love you, and we're here to support everything that you're doing and our students at the school. With that being said, I won't belabor us with continued announcements here today, but rather simply invite everyone forward to receive Andidaron. Mr. Cantonis will be here at coffee hour for anybody who would like to pick his brain or to ask a question or two, and we look forward to sharing that fellowship together. May the good Lord be with us this day and always. Please come forward at this time to receive Andidaron.